clerics to punish the women as they saw fit. With the swift coalition victory in Kuwait, security of the kingdom seemed assured. But the continued presence of American soldiers in the land of the two holy mosques was a major irritant.
The fear was, of course, those people come and never leave. This is the experience of the Middle East historically.
And constantly we reassured the Saudis that we planned, after the liberation of Kuwait, to leave, until it became apparent that Saddam Hussein was not going to fall from power. We didn't withdraw, so we stayed in Saudi Arabia with no agreement, no understanding between us and the Saudis. The U.S. military clearly understood that their presence in Saudi Arabia was politically irritating and in many respects dangerous to the good health of the relationship.
Osama bin Laden would seize upon the issue, and his followers would go on the offensive. On the morning of November 13, 1995, a massive bomb shook Riyadh. 4 American military contractors and 1 American soldier died. Those arrested said they were inspired by bin Laden.
When the explosion in Riyadh happened, we were tracking bin Laden since the early 90s. We stripped him of his citizenship. We knew that he was a danger, and we knew that he was planning mischief against Saudi Arabia.
Osama bin Laden began his whole quest as directed against the Saudi royal family. I mean, his main enemy was the regime, and his main goal was to overthrow this regime. And then he moved philosophically to the natural conclusion that the people who are supporting this regime are the American military. And I will get much more resonance for my message if I were to attack the American military. And I detected for the first time in Saudi Arabia a certain amount of sympathy with this act.
In 1996, another bombing in Dhahran killed 19 American soldiers. U.S.-Saudi relations were coming under increasing strain. At this critical juncture, King Fahad was incapacitated by a stroke.
Crown Prince Abdullah comes into the picture at this point in time, and the country is a different country again, because things have happened in this country, and most importantly, it is the introduction of Arabic language satellite programs.
Beamed-in TV programs were beyond the control of the royals. For the first time, Saudi citizens began to see for themselves what others saw as the shortcomings of their country. The people were exposed to reports about lack of civil rights and political freedoms, and royal corruption.
There is no more control of the news. This is a new paradigm. And the Crown Prince himself is part of that. The Crown Prince spends his time watching Al Jazeera. And while CNN would be showing the American audience an American reporter riding in an Israeli tank, Al Jazeera would be showing an Arab audience, Palestinian kids being chased or beaten up by Israeli soldiers. And this phenomenon cannot be divorced from the way the Saudi leadership is now reacting to the United States.
Gruesome images of the Arab-Israeli conflict became part of Saudi's daily viewing. Throughout the 90s, U.S. efforts to forge a lasting peace foundered. The Saudis remained on the sidelines while continuing to support Arafat and militant groups like Hamas. But when they sensed President Bush might abandon the peace process, they took a more active role.
As soon as the Bush administration came into office, we had discussions with them about the American policy in the region. We were urging the United States to get engaged in the peace process. And when there was an escalation of violence and the president was asked about Sharon's actions, his response was perceived in the region as a signal to Sharon that he could do whatever he wanted.
Israelis will not negotiate under terrorist threat. Simple as that. And if the Palestinians are interested in a dialogue, then I strongly urge Mr. Arafat to put 100% effort into solving the terrorist activity, into stopping the terrorist activity. And I believe he can do a better job of doing that.
And at that point, the Crown Prince sent a very powerful message to the president. It is obvious that you have decided to support Sharon irrespective of what the consequences are to American policy or to your interest or to the interest of your friends. You're a sovereign country, you can do whatever you want. We are now in a position where we have to take actions that serve our interests without any regard to how they may affect your interests.
And the letter to President Bush merely is a reflection of his character, of his willingness to challenge the United States. We can't take this anymore. We've had it up to here. Either you be more fair, more equitable in your dealings with the Arab world, or we will simply find a different arrangement than the one we are having with the United States. We can no longer have the same kind of relationship that we have had for the last 60 years.
And within 24 hours, we had a response from the president to the Crown Prince, in which the president laid out his vision for Middle East, 2 states, shared Jerusalem, just settlement of refugee issue, in very clear terms. And he said that we can only do that if we can stop the violence. Crown Prince responded to the president and said this is a positive step and you need to articulate this publicly. And the president agreed to do so 2 or 3 days before September 11.
Oh my God, there it goes! Get out of here!
The peace talks collapsed in the rubble of 9/11. Some Saudis say the attacks were welcomed.
People received a message in their mobile phones. Congratulations. And then the next message in the mobile phone was prayers to Bin Laden. They were very jubilant and happy and looking at Bin Laden as a hero. People started killing sheep and killing camels and making big feasts and inviting their relatives and friends to celebrate the big event in America.
There was a general shock, of course, disbelief. But there was a group of people who said, okay, let them suffer now, let the Americans suffer.
Let me put it this way. I might hate someone's guts, okay, but I would not condone his murder. If by chance he was, hit by a bus and passed away, I wouldn't cry for him, you see? And this is the kind of feeling that took place in a segment of the society.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Attention was quickly focused on Saudi Arabia as the heart of the problem.
When it became clear that 15 of the 19 were Saudis, that was a disaster. A total disaster. Because Bin Laden at that moment had made, in the minds of Americans, Saudi Arabia into an enemy.
A new U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Robert Jordan, arrived in Riyadh in October 2001.
At the official level, they were appalled. They were embarrassed. Some of them, frankly, were in denial. I remember meeting with one of the very most senior royals, a very well-respected individual, but he clearly was in denial. He said this had to have been a Zionist plot. Saudis are not like this, and Saudis by themselves, frankly, are not capable of launching a plot this sophisticated.
People refused to accept that this was Saudis doing this. Imagine if you wake up one day, you have children, and find that one of your sons is a mass murderer. How gut-wrenching a discovery is that?
America's war on terror would deeply divide Saudis. When Americans invaded Afghanistan, the government quietly allowed the U.S. to use Saudi air bases for command and control operations. But Saudi militants captured in Afghanistan would make up the biggest segment of the prison population shipped to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The war in Iraq posed an even bigger challenge. Americans used Saudi air bases for bombing missions, but the government worried about the reactions of its people.
I'll never forget being told by some members of the royal family, Mr. Ambassador, please don't win Iraq and lose Saudi Arabia. And they were that concerned. I think they meant that there was a great possibility that if they supported us in the way we needed, it would further alienate the arch conservatives and the Islamist extremists from the royal family and from the government, that it could destabilize the regime.
And people were extremely worried that after Iraq is finished and done with, the United States will turn its head and start targeting countries like Saudi Arabia, like Syria, like Egypt, Iran.
Baghdad fell in a matter of weeks. Just days later, U.S. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld arrived in Riyadh to announce U.S. troops were finally pulling out of Saudi Arabia.
And they'll leave with us grateful for the support and cooperation that the kingdom provided.
جاء أصل الكفر يغزو دارنا من صليب الغدر والكل أصم جاء أصل الكفر يغزو دارنا من صليب.
Since the Gulf War, the American troop presence in Saudi Arabia had been a rallying cry for al-Qaeda.
ماتت الغيرات في أهل الشيم ماتت الغيرات.
Now the American air base stands empty. But it didn't seem to matter to bin Laden. 2 weeks later, on May 12, 2003, al-Qaeda militants attacked 3 compounds in Riyadh, housing hundreds of foreign workers. 35 people were killed, including 9 Americans. Over 100 were wounded. This was something new. The attack grabbed Saudi's attention in a way that 9/11 did not.
The next day, Colin Powell and I visited the Crown Prince, and he was white as a ghost and absolutely shaken to his core by what had happened. And to the extent they had been in denial about the terrorist threat in the kingdom, that denial ended on the morning of May the 13th.
We have to face the fact that these people who attacked and bombed in Riyadh are Saudis, our youth, our sons and brothers. They are not expatriates. They are not CIA here. They are not Zionists. They are our own people.